bid.
Almost. Yeah.
I don't know, I started getting nasty out there already.
Yeah, I've got an empty cup.
That was the plan, she was going to be here.
Thank you.
Well, and that's what it comes down to, right? No.
All right, well, shall we get going? It's 5 o'clock.
Started trying to make an argument.
Okay, it's being 5 o'clock. We're going to call this meeting to order. Madam Clerk, could you take the roll?
Mayor Miller,
Here.
Alderperson McClanathan,
Here.
Ross,
Here.
Smith,
Here.
Busker is absent, Brashaw,
Here.
Keister,
Here.
Chesney, and Clem is absent. Somebody just came in, though.
All right, let's go ahead and do the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
There's one item that's going to be stricken from the agenda. It's number 5, approval of the minutes from the June 5th, 2017 Finance Committee, the whole meeting. Those minutes were approved in the consent agenda on the August 7th, 2017 meeting. But other than striking agenda item number 5, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second it.
There was a motion by Alderperson Brashaw, second by Alderman Ross. Any comments? All in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the motion carries. Public comments. Do we have any public comments on agenda items at this time? No? All right, thank you. That gets us to item number 7, presentation of pressure points for the budget, and that presentation will be by City Manager Crow. Manager Crow?
All right, my mic's on here. So I may ask the department heads, and I know a couple of them are at the 911 board, but as we go through, if you have questions, they have helped me put this together, and Alderman Clem, I'll wait until he gets in. And so, and Randy also helped me, was a big help, and we've been slogging through the budget since, with the department heads since last December. So we want to get everybody the pressure points, and we're going to talk about, you need to understand the environment in which we are currently operating and the things that we have done. So we'll start with it. So revenue pressure points is, so as we've talked about it earlier, the state has reduced our personal property replacement tax by 28%. This is continuation on from last year. Currently, our personal property replacement tax is dedicated in a tiered system. As when the state did away with the personal property replacement tax, it had to go to fire and police pensions first, library second, and then us third. Randy and I, looking at it, looks like with the reduction in personal property replacement tax, we probably will have, originally we had 128,000 that would come to the city. We will probably be not receiving much. We're going to be even tough making the budget requirement for the library. State income tax, last year's as part of the budget is they cut state income tax by 10% to make up for that reduction in state income tax. They moved it to 14 payments this year. They have, the state legislature, or the governor, I should say, has said continue on with that 10% cut, but you're only going to get 10 payments for fiscal year 2019. They're also taking 2% of the revenue process Currently, we are about $1 million in outstanding grants between DOPA, the demos, and a couple of the other grants behind. That's putting pressure on this year, but that's going to continue to pressurize. We're finding that the demo grants are taking about a year to reimburse from the time we do it. So, and if we're budgeting and balancing that on grants, balancing the city's budget on grants, that causes some real issues. One of the things in looking back through the last 3 years and then leading into next year, we've had a $2 million reduction in revenue to the city. Our budget 3 years ago, we had about $21 million in revenue. This year, we're going to be right around 18. That is due to a reduction in EAV, a reduction of income tax, and a reduction in the food and beverage tax that we've received. We have seen an increase in sales tax, but it's been minimal to offset those reductions. So what the result is for this year is we're $300,000 less projected revenue than FY 2000 for this FY than last year. So all of the work we did to reduce the cost to the city from health care and personal property replacement tax has basically been eaten up by the reductions in this, by the reductions that the state has placed upon us. So, from the general fund, some expenditures. We did get our street assessment back, and it was completed. We have $60.3 million in street repairs from our street assessment. $21.6 million of that is for 12.5 miles of complete rebuild. These are streets that are graded in poor condition. Basically, they're given a score of below 70. Is that correct? So these are full reconstruction with storm sewer involved in it. We have 26.1 million that are in fair condition. Basically, we only have 53 miles of streets that are currently in acceptable condition. Demo cost, we talked about that. We're going to go more detail on the demo cost. This year we spent $1.2 million in demo. Of that, $750,000 was supposed to be reimbursed from cost, and we have yet to receive that money. The airport road, we still have that decision hanging out there as we go forward. $110,000 for reimbursement. City Hall demo, we are going to rebid this, but currently it's $265,000 for demo, $316,000 for asbestos removal, and $100,000 for repair of the wall. It's a total combined cost of just a little under $700,000. Flood mitigation, DNR has contacted us. They're actually going to be coming up, meeting with us. They want us to start moving and looking at flood mitigation. We do, particularly over in the east of the Pecatonica, and we do have $85,000 currently in demo money to demo abandoned properties over in that area, but that's going to become an issue. It may be directed by DNR to move forward with that. And then NewCo costs, this is the new consolidated anticipated cost to us of about $450,000. Really, most of this is coming out of TIF and hotel motel tax, and money that we've already allotted to other economic development. So kind of give you an idea of what the different gradings for the streets. So great is resurfaced, built roads, good. Fair is cracking. I think probably a good example of fair is Empire, if anybody's driven Empire. And then poor, basically poor is we can't patch, or I'll give you an example of, so we went out, Highland, was it Highland Avenue? Highland Avenue, we were asked to patch Highland Avenue, 2 blocks of Highland Avenue. Highland was in poor condition. It took us 3.5 truckloads to patch the potholes along Highland Avenue. Some things, funding sources, just we want to kind of, so we're eligible for anything that's on Major state route for funding roads is, can be used STP, Surface Transportation. We still have to come up with a 20% grant. It usually takes about 3 years to get that money in there. So motor fuel tax, when we use motor fuel tax to rebuild a street, if the street has sidewalks and storm sewer, we have to completely repair the sidewalks, storm sewer, make it ADA compliant. And then if we have local money, we can do some things that we can't do with the other funding sources when we're talking about streets. It's also less paperwork. We can only, some of the things we've had to do that Dennis, since he's been here, we had over 14 MFTs that had not been reconciled with the state. He has since gotten that reconciled. Basically, we were changing it once the council had approved, added more mileage, which was a good thing, but then IDOT wants us to justify why we're doing that. All right. Some of the blight, this is what we've got remaining in blight reduction. We still have 192,000 of the original grant in round 1, 468,000 in round 2, and then of those we still need to identify 9 properties, and we're working to get those 9 properties identified to meet the grant requirements. Can continue on to do that. What I have tasked Nancy to do and her team to do is identify those grants and work with the nonprofits. We're working with NICA right now to get those additional properties, which will make the remainder of that money available to us. We talked about the 85,000, and this was awarded in 2016, but due to the state issues with not having a budget, it wasn't available to us until this year. That money is earmarked to be used east of the Pecatonica only. So that is 8 to 10 abandoned homes or blighted properties east of the Pecatonica. And we've submitted an IHDA abandoned properties round 3 grant for $250,000. We don't know. The last grant we got of this was for $71,000. We do not know if we're going to get this, but those are properties that we don't have to bring in a nonprofit to do it. Okay, here's a kind of average residential cost. If we're doing a fast track, it'll cost us about $12,000. This is a fast track, is we don't have the requirement for asbestos removal. The issue is that we can't do any more than about 20 to 25 properties on fast track, or it's considered a program by regulations. So the other properties cost about $16,000. This is on an average of what we did this year. Anticipated cost of 80 demos, as I said, is about $1.3 million. And we're currently anticipated shortfall based upon our grants of about $544,000. And this is a property that we talked about, Iroquois, which is the 7 right across from the Adams Street Fire Station. This I know has a lot of visibility both within the 3rd Ward. I have a lot of people asking about 3rd Ward and what we're doing over there. I know this is a high visibility and also has a lot of visibility, but this is going to be the cost as we move forward. So, all right. Some options to offset cost. Reduce staff to include police, fire, streets, community development. That's where on the general fund, we can also only do 40 demos, do not back general fund, not to impact what's in the money for the general fund. Do overlays, vice replacement. What Dennis has done is he's looked at what streets we can, in that worst 12.6 miles, which may be suitable candidates for overlay. An example is Clinton. We're going to actually replace the water main. It's in the capital budget for Clinton, and we're going to do an overlay on top of that next year. That's one of our recommendations. Delay this demo on City Hall. You'll notice that it's in the capital budget, but not everything in the capital budget is funded. That is in there in case we have money that comes available. Reduce the buys and capitals for streets, police. Currently, Tom Dole and Dennis have programmed the purchase or leasing of 2 new snow plows. and some other equipment. We can postpone those, as I discussed this morning with Peter. If we look at those after we get done with it, we'll do an assessment of the condition of them after the winter is and make a determination if we really need to do that. And we have 2 police cars in the capital budget right now, and we can possibly delay those. But it's one of these robbing Peter to pay Paul type of scenarios as we go forward. For the reducing of the staff, right now we have 1 opening currently not filled in police. We have a couple openings, 3 openings in fire that are not filled. Streets, we are fully the only thing we're missing there is a mechanic, which we are currently advertising, and we can make reductions in community development as required as we look at that. But we believe that we're at minimum manning in community development, but if we have to, that is a... The other thing is seek other sources of funding, grants, or to fund some of these projects. Look at it. One of the things we are meeting with DNR on flooding mitigation. They said we may have in the realm of $25 million a year over a 3 to 5 year period for 3 years. As we go forward, we're going to sit down and talk with them on what they do for flood mitigation. Some recommendation. This is strictly recommendation. I'm waiting for guidance on the council on these recommendations. Only do demos that we have grant money for that would give us about 46 demos. Conduct overlay only to increase the amount of roads that can be done. Do not demo Old City Hall at this time. And look at our capital expenditures to free up money for additional street work. That's some of our recommendations going forward. So, pressure on water and sewer and storm sewer. We have a $6 million deficit that we discovered. And this comes out of when we moved did away with the Water and Sewer Commission. We found that when Randy and I started digging into this back in November, so we went forward in the budget, they really didn't understand what was going on and how to put a municipal budget together. They were commingling all the funds. This has caused a $6 million deficit in sewer fund, but the good news is we have about a $7.5 million surplus in water as we go forward. But they should not be commingled. They need to be separate funds. We have $9 million dedicated to new wells, new water treatment plant. We have requested an IEPA loan. Our last loan, we just got notified that we're getting a 30% offset. We expect that same type of offset on this loan. We have $75 million in water main replacement over the next 30 years. That's 3 to 5 miles a year, and that would be done in conjunction with replacement of roads as we go forward. Currently, we're experiencing an estimated 28% loss in water, which is the standard. National standard is 12 to 15%. So we do have and that's no surprise to you. We have this is a little bit of a surprise. I haven't talked to some of you about it. The whole upgrade to the Hancock Street Sewer Plant to meet MPDS requirements is $56 million. Now, when it was originally showed to you by Tom and Sean, it said for $12 million. I've gone back and talked to Tom Glendenning about this. He felt that at this time, the first phase was $12 million, and that's what he showed you. But you need to understand that we have $56 million that we've got to do to meet our MPDS requirements over the next 15 years. And that's moving the plant, doing some upgrades in the plant, moving sections that are in the floodplain area, and really upgrading them. We've asked for we've put in for an initial $12.9 million in IEPA grants, and our MPDS permit is being reviewed, what is it, tomorrow or?
Well, there's a meeting on
Wednesday. So for infiltration issues, we're currently processing. It's really with the storms, we've got a good feel for it. We're processing about 137% more sewage than we are actually selling in water, which indicates we have a big infiltration. We see a large jump during the storms. Our standard process is about 6 million gallons MGD a day. It jumps to 16 million in the middle of when we get more than 3 inches of rain. And so we're going to begin televising in the 3rd Ward. Storm sewer, the last. So every time it rains, Dennis and I go out and look at where we're seeing water run off, and we have at least 7 known locations where we've identified that are required stormwater work. And I know that at least Peter and Tom have talked to me about several issues, and we have identified all those. And I know there are others in other wards that need to be addressed as well. So here's what the 30 to 40-year plan, 30-year plan is for, that's outside. This does not have the water plant, and this does not have the sewer plant. Those are on the other side. So these are the things we've got going on as that has $134 million, and that's our current capital plan that we have set aside for money will meet the requirements for if we keep as we increase the next water bill $8 and then following on another $8. That is going to, we believe, with what we're tracking, meet our requirements. Okay, the capital plan, you have it in front of you here. I'm sorry about, I know Alderman Brashaw gives me a hard time about how small my writing is, but this is the water plan. As you'll notice, Clinton is on there. Adams Street and Clinton are 2 priorities. Adams Street is a priority because we may have a new developer that goes out on Adams Street that we're in negotiations with right now. We are one of the final 2 sites for a new facility out there next to the jail. So that's been moved in FY 2020, but Clinton is one of the primary drives that we have to take care of, and we have some other drives that are really will begin to address some of our issues. And the capital plan is a 5-year plan. The way I like to say about it is the first 3 years are more hard, what we need to do. The last 2 years are what we think we should do. And what it does is we put on there, so if we have to move one of them forward, we can move the others back. It's really a guidelines on how we want to go forward in addressing these issues. And we talked about the new well and the test wells that are being done right now. That's a carryover for the test well ongoing. Streets, we get $615,000 every year in motor fuel. So the MFT reconstruction, that is Peck Path. That is our grant portion of the grant that is required for Peck Path. That we're getting a $1.9 million grant. We're going to begin work on that. It's going to be bid out in August. So we have $350,000 for mill and overlay. Clinton's going to be the focus on that as we go forward. The Peck Path you see in 2020, that's if we go forward and approve the next phase of the grant. Jack Carey and I have talked with the Chairman Hadley and says we're not going to, since they held us out on the limb the last time, we're not going to say we're going to go in for this grant unless the county approves it first, and then this sets up in 2020 the next phase of Peck Path. Why is the Peck Path important to us? Is that is a tourism driver. They indicate that if we complete the Peck Path, clear out to Winnebago, go from Chicago to out to Galena, they figure that we can drive between $15 and $30 million in tourism to Freeport because we are the central location on the James Adams Trail and the Peck Path. Really, we're talking about hotel, motel rooms as well as restaurants. So that's why that's on there. Sewer, we talked about, we have digester cleaning. One of the things we can do is move digester cleaning. We've actually talked about over 2 years. We also have sanitary plant conveyance subtotal. That's some of the work that we're starting to do in dealing with the plant operation out there rework into this year. And again, this is enterprise fund money, business-like activities. This money can only be transferred over through administrative, and we've put the administrative, and it's not the capital fund, but out of the operating funds for water and sewer. And what we've done is we've gone very carefully through everybody's salary that supports water and sewer, since we've now included water and sewer as part of this department and charged a portion of those salaries to the water and sewer operating fund. So that is, when you see the general fund at the next meeting, that's one of the things you'll see in there. So there is that. Randy and I have talked about, all right, how are we charging each one of the person's salaries going forward? My portion, my salary, portion of Randy's salary, Michelle's, a half and half split on Dennis's. Whoever supports that can go forward. Will be charged a little bit against water and sewer. So, and then this is the capital plan for everybody else. The 416, it's in your budget. It was going to be really hard, Sally, so I didn't. So it's in your budget. 416,000, that's a large grant in there. If we get the ambulance, if we don't, that cuts by 2/3 the amount. Talked about the police, that's 2 police cars as well as cameras over in the, some camera work, some other equipment, over in the high, to address some of the crime issues. Streets, that's the lease we already have in there, plus for the street sweeper. This is what we get equivalent off our motor fuel tax, or our additional 2-cent tax. It's about $272,000. That figure could come down if we don't want to get the 2 additional snow plows. IT, this is rolling over from this year. We have narrowed down the IT selection for the new financial software. It's taken us a while to get everybody on the same page and a lot of meetings, but we plan to purchase that in 2019. We've got it narrowed down, and we'll present that to you later on. That's what's in that. And then some additional replacements. We're starting a replacement plan of all hardware and making sure that we're staying updated. So you know that Kurt has replaced, we had 5 computers that were still running Windows XP and Windows 98 when we stood up the IT department, that made us vulnerable to ransomware. We have since replaced those, and we're going to establish a regular replacement so we are keeping our computers up to date. And I put Old City Hall in there. That's in case we can come up with the extra money. I put an extra 8. We budgeted 800,000, even though it's just under 700,000, to give us a little leeway. All right. Water. This is the revenue. And it's in front of you. We're on track. The good news is, and you will see it out here, water, we're right on track, and we're getting the capital fund. The one thing you'll notice is, this is going to be a change in future budgets, when we talk about expenses, is previously the depreciation in the equipment, when we get into expenses, were rolled into the budget. Those are supposed to be outside of the budget. Municipal government is not budgeted in the same manner that depreciation is done with businesses. It is only rolled into by the auditor when they look at it, because those are not counted as expenses on our expense network. But the revenue, we're right on line with what we expected. Same with sewer. This rolls into the CPI increase as well. CPI for this year for water and sewer is 2.9%. That's our estimated as of right now. So it's rolled into the sewer. It is not yet rolled into the water, because as we were trying to figure out what our actual expenditures on water, I think we've got that nailed down. So you'll see the new figures come in on water. It took us 6 weeks to actually run and get it nailed down to how much water we were actually selling to people. It took many of us getting together and looking at that project. So So water and sewer storm expenses, you have the expenses in front of you. What we're seeing is water expenses minus depreciation. We have develops a capital reserve of 1.1 million, and revenue is equal. You'll notice that revenue equals expenditures and we develop a capital reserve. Sewer expenses minus depreciation is $367,000. We actually are paying $541,000 per debt, as you requested, Peter, when you and I talked about this. So we're starting to pay that debt down. And we had a small debt that was paid off with stormwater, and we're right on track to pay that off next year. So, with that, questions?
Mr. Chair.
Alderman Keister.
Yes, a couple real quick questions. When you were talking about pressure expenditures on the general fund, you're referring to street repair, 21.6 million for 12.5 miles, including sewer reconstruction. The 21.6 million, does that include the sewers replacement, or is that a separate since it comes out of a different budget? Is that going to be separate?
I included that in the cost of the street there.
Okay, but that would come out of the capital improvement from the water and sewer rather than the general fund, correct?
Our sewer fund cannot handle that kind of reconstruction.
Okay. And if I may continue, the second question is if we do opt for manpower reduction, which in my own personal opinion, I think we're at minimum for everybody, but it might have to be an option. We're going to be looking at this as a temporary thing until we can get the finances back to replace these people?
So that's the goal. However, right now, unless the state can get their act together and get us back the personal property replacement tax and the income tax, being able to replace those bodies back, we don't have a revenue stream to fix those. If we use that as a cut, because then if we're using those as a cut to fix other issues, the chances of us so those are to fix the issues of the streets, the demos, the other things that we need to get done. But the state told us this year we were supposed to get our income tax back. We didn't. So if the state tells us that we're still not going to get our personal property replacement tax back and our income tax back, we have to continue on keeping this reduced manning up.
Final.
One of the things is, you got to realize that we have already, that reduced manning is based upon the increase in police manning. So we had initially in last year's budget, we had said we were going to give 49 bodies to the police department. We currently have 48 or 47, and we're going to keep it. We're going to bring that back to 48. But that 49th body, that's what we were talking about.
Okay, final question, Mr. Chair.
Alderman Keister.
Looking at this, and from our conversation earlier today, I know nobody likes to talk about this, but are we looking at proposals for additional revenue sources and stuff to try and shore this up? Because let's face it, this don't look real good. And I think whether we do it or not is one thing, but I think we really need to start looking at proposals for possible other revenue sources to help shore some of this stuff up. Because if we continue in this manner without increasing anything, it's only going to get worse.
So if that's the direction the council, what I felt my direction on the council was to say, here's our fixed amount of budget. I'm going to work within that revenue stream. If the council directs me to go look for other revenue sources, I can go and come up with proposals. My revenue sources right now is to look for other grants that we have available. It's not to increase any type of taxes, but operate within our means with the idea that we go out and look for grants to help fund everything we're doing, much as we are doing with the capital budget with the fire department right now with the replacement of the ambulance.
Chair.
Alderman Chesney.
Thanks. I'd like to talk a little bit about the personal property replacement tax.
Sure.
It's a 28% reduction. What's that in dollar amount?
Randy?
We originally were anticipating about $488,000, and it looks like we're going to get about $410,000, so about $78,000.
How much?
About $78,000.
78. Is that just, that's a projected change?
Yes, we don't have any definite numbers from Department of Revenue or the Illinois Municipal League, but based on last year's calculations, what the governor is proposing is to keep that 28% cut and not restore it as was promised.
Okay, follow-up, Chair.
Alderman Chesney.
Okay, so the 28% reduction, was that realized in this year's budget?
It's going to overlap because the state's fiscal year is different than ours, it's overlapping.
Okay. And then the 10% cut in income now, is that just simply because the payments are different? Because 14 payments and 10 payments would be 24 payments. So we received more in this year, but less than next year?
What happened in this current fiscal year, in the state's current fiscal year, they reduced our payments by 10%. And then what they said was, gee, they used to put the money in a separate, or put it in the general fund of the state and then put it in the distribution fund. What they're doing now is they're putting it directly in the distribution fund, therefore we're going to get our money sooner. So rather than waiting 3 or 4 months, we're getting it monthly, the month after it's due. So this year, and this is again, it's overlapping a little bit, we're getting 14 payments, but because they sped up the payments process, we're only going to get 10 payments next year. Plus the governor, again, recommended that that the 10% cut that they initiated last year continue this coming year.
Okay, so your revenue projections are based off of recommendations, not exactly action from the General Assembly.
Not for next year, that's correct. Based on what the governor recommended and what the state's done to us in the past, yes.
Okay. And what's the anticipated reduction in overall revenues based off of a recommendation?
On the state income tax, approximately $400,000,
A $400,000 reduction
yes,
proposed.
yes.
Okay. And then the 2% of revenue processed, what is that in a reduction in revenues?
2% they're taking, I have not calculated that.
Okay. And then Lowell, how did we get to 2 million less revenue than 3 years ago? How did you arrive at that number?
We looked at historical levels. What we received for revenue, projected revenue for this year is 18 million. What we had 3 years ago was 21 million.
But I'm not getting to 3 million based off of the numbers that I've heard today. How are we getting to 3 million?
Well, I think over time, we've been having reductions in our revenues, in our revenue sources. So over the last 3 years, I'm not sure what all the changes have taken place over the last 3 years because I wasn't here, but just looking at what the current budget is and what was 3 years ago, we're looking at $3 million plus.
So we have the anticipated revenue is for this year is about 18.2 million. The estimated the revenue that was received 3 years ago was 21 million. Now, what we looked at was, so we've seen a reduction. Where we're seeing the reduction is there was a reduction in EAV, there was a reduction of income tax that we received, a reduction in food and beverage tax, the amount that we've received. There are other factors involved in that as well. The state distribution, the amount of money is less to us than what we received 3 years ago. So one of the things we have seen is an increase in sales tax. From last year to this year, we've seen about a $45,000 increase in sales tax. But estimated because we're projecting out what our current sales tax is out to the end of the year in comparison to that.
What would the EAV have any impact on our budget?
Yeah, we're just seeing as there is a, I understand your question. Let me do a little bit more research and get back to you on that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair.
Alderperson Bradshaw.
Thank you. Manager Crowe, I was looking at this 2% revenue processing fee that the state is going to be charging our municipality. I'm assuming they're charging all
They're
cities?
charging every municipality.
And continue, please.
Go ahead.
The 2% revenue processing fee, is that on all sales tax for every product sold in Freeport?
It's everything that just touches the state's hands. So they're taking 2% from us this was under the last budget approval, and it is continue on. IML has approached and asked to reduce that to 1%, but that has not gotten out of committee.
Continue.
Go ahead.
Thank you. With all the extra fees and things we're paying, it just puts us in such a quandary because we always have had such a tight belt anyhow, and we keep trying to figure out where we're going to cut this from. So I understand that, I'm sure you and Finance Director Bucas have been a little concerned over these figures as well.
I haven't been sleeping well at night.
And I don't blame you. I don't think any of us have slept well because of some of this. Maybe you do or do not know this answer, but have you, by any chance, talked to other municipalities to see how they're handling their shortfalls and their deficit numbers as well?
Yeah. So I actually sent an article to Peter. So O'Fallon, Illinois raised their hotel motel tax from 5% to 9% as they went forward. And they used that into redeveloping their downtown. There are other municipalities that are looking at, as they go forward, in using gas tax. Galesburg raised their gas tax to go forward. Moline has raised their gas tax going forward. I had Steve look at it. We're running about 2%. Most home rule communities are running about 6.5% on average for gas tax. So that's what they're doing to offset the cost. And the other communities additionally are doing reductions in staff, but to the point. So our staff 5 years ago was 236 people, and we're down to 192 as of today. So I can continue to look at cutting those staff members.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair.
Alderman Smith.
The taxes you just mentioned are available only to home rule communities.
That's correct.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
As an alternative to demolition, is there any exploration to just putting the old city hall into private hands as opposed to?
We've had 5 developers come in, and all 5 developers have toured the building. And they have said, once they go into the building, they say, literally, the only thing that it's good for is one of 3 things. Office space, being a city hall, can't do that one, or being a hotel. But their average return is about $120 to $170 per square foot, because the mezzanine deck, if you go into it, is literally pulling the building inward, and it's got to be taken out. And that's why one of the reasons we're rebidding this is we found if they have to go in and do the asbestos removal, went out to engineers, they're going to have to pull the mezzanine deck out anyway before doing that. So we were getting a double cost on the demo, so we decided to see if we can get a reduced cost by bidding it out to a single person. I do have one person that has approached me that wants to buy it and turn it into a home. And then put his workshop in the basement. We did approach, there is a person that does demo out of Indiana that does reclamation. He has not yet come out and looked at the property. We've approached him. and asked him to come out and take a look at it. And what he does is he takes the stone, the steel, and does the whole demo for free. And he does this throughout. He does primarily warehouses, but we asked him to take a look at City Hall as well.
Manager Grohl? Or do you have follow-up, Alderman Smith? All right. To put this in context with the rest, because obviously the next couple weeks we're going to be doing police and fire, and then the other departments also. As it stands right now, it's in context. Do you anticipate bringing us for the rest of the budget, a balanced budget for that portion, and we're just dealing with these issues on the capital side?
So, we're going to present to you a balanced budget across the board. It's the issue on. Then it gets to be that balanced budget. It's whether or not we address some of those other issues, whether we want to do the 80 demos that we had been initially tasked with rather than what we have for the grant money, whether we want to go forward and do additional roads. Last year's capital budget we set aside for the $250,000 for roads got spent on, some of it got spent on the engineering for Gladewood Bridge, some of it got spent on the street assessment, some of it got spent on the additional salt we had to buy, which I'm glad we bought it with the snowstorm now because we were down here with that. So some of that has all been programmed and used that up. It went into the engineering as we had talked about, but if we want to set that aside again in next year's budget, then we need to figure out where that money's going to come from.
What are the other unfunded portions of this capital plan outside of the old City Hall cost?
So what we have in there is you need to realize that we only have enough money to do resurfacing of about, say about a mile of roads with the MFT fund. Is that about right?
I'd have to go back through the emails that I sent you.
Yeah, so I believe that's what we talked about. The airport road would not be budgeted into this because the way we would pay for the airport road is through the use of MFT, which would then reduce the amount of roads we can do going forward. And we would have to relook at which vehicles we're purchasing and leasing in the next program for the large vehicles. We're already online for the leasing of the 20 vehicles out of the capital fund.
So right now, as things stand, it's basically, if we were to pass everything, and including the stuff we haven't seen too, just pass it as is, no City Hall, grants down to 46, no airport road, and limited road work. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you're asking us, what adjustments do you want us to make?
Right.
And
I'm asking for what the priorities are from council so we can go in and look at if we need to make changes in our priorities to look at where we can readdress money with the understanding that water and sewer, that water, sewer, storm sewer is an enterprise fund. We can't take money to do roads or do the demo of City Hall out of that money.
Alderman Chesney.
Thank you. Well, going back to the revenues, I guess that's my sticking point is why are we structuring a budget based off of recommended budgets down in Springfield? I mean, I would think that if we passed a balanced budget based off of revenues that have been historic norms, absent action from the state, why are we giving a very not so rosy picture on our revenue size, but then because I just don't think that's the way we should structure a budget. I mean, worst case scenario, we go out of our reserves and then we can put that in place the following year. But why would we structure that based off of
the
a
problem,
governor's proposed budget?
The problem is we don't have any reserves right now because we haven't been reimbursed for the grants.
I thought we had like 4 or 5 million.
No. So what you've been told about reserves is not actually what's in there. That's what operating money we have on hand. We don't actually have never had a real reserve. Remember, we passed the ordinance back there. Part of the problem is and I'm going to be very blunt here, is that Randy and I have problems seeing what the day-to-day bank accounts are. Okay? So we have a problem telling you what the reserves are, because we talk about reserves, we're talking about money that's in the operating fund. We do not, to give you an example, we did not know if we were going to have enough money in our account last week to pay health care. So we were able to move some funds around to make sure that we paid the health care bill, because there wasn't that money in the operating account. When you talk about reserves, you do not have, where your reserves exist is on the water and sewer side. It does not exist as it is because we have not received a lot of our grant. We have over $1 million in grant money we haven't received. So we don't, that's general operating fund on that. Is there anything else? That's an accurate picture.
Right. Okay, you're using the word reserves. We were always told we had $4 to $5 million in monies that was available in the need of an emergency. Is that not the case?
I don't believe it is, no.
And Manager Crow and Director Bucas, I think what we see periodically is those treasurer's reports that say, you know, you've got X amount of accounts, and then it hits a balance of, you know, anywhere from 4.5 to 6 million, things of that nature. How do you think that the council should view those reports, and what is that actually telling us?
Well, some of those accounts are restricted. You can only use them for whatever is in there, you know, what it's set aside for. But right now, well, I can't say right now. A couple weeks ago, I know that there was not enough money in the general fund to pay all our bills, that we had to move other money over.
Mr. Chair,
Alderman Clem.
maybe this will help a little, maybe it won't. I don't think there's a magic missing $4 million here, okay? Which is your first thought, you know. When we were told before that there was basically $3 to $4 million, and we were always told this, against that was, I can always remember, was, I believe, $2-some million for the, was it the Big Four or one of the big water things? And I also remember you guys explaining last year, as we changed over in the budgeting that we did, that there was really not the reserves that everybody thought it was, and was all rolled over into your new system, so to speak. Is that correct?
That's correct. So we, on an annual basis, have that money that we have set aside is restricted towards paying our bonds as we go forward. We have a $2.5 million bond payment and loan payment every year. Bonds are against the general fund, and that reserve has been set aside in that. Where you actually have a reserve, which we've built a reserve in right now, is in your capital funds under water and sewer. And we've built that over the last year.
Go ahead, Alderman Clem.
Okay, because remember that they brought paperwork to us to start off the process of putting an actual reserve account into force maybe 6 months ago, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, so that's kind of where we're at. You know, I think in the process, it's been looked at differently financially. I would say, you know, as I look at this, and I got this, Lowell and I talked about this the other day, you know, I'm the old guy here, and I've been around to watch the 200 and some people go down to 100 and some people. And there's everybody thinks that there's always a whole bunch of room to cut, and there's not a whole bunch of room to cut. I believe we're at a point we need to take a look at what your recommendations are, what our actual things that we can do are. You know, this, how many $1 million worth of road didn't happen overnight, and as Lowell and I discussed, just to keep in mind, Dennis mentioned to him that, you know, all these roads were done before we had the big thaw this year and everything went south on a bunch of roads. So please keep in mind, we got more dollars and cents in roads then we need to fix. But I think we've finally come to the point that there has to be some type of revenue source come in to do something, to change roads, and things that we have moving forward. You know, everybody, you know, you hear from everybody, whether it be a coffee shop or whether it be wherever, man, are the roads terrible. Yeah, they're terrible. You know, and when you start telling them how many miles of them we got and what all we have to do, and there's no money to do it, it instantly comes to mind, somebody's got to do something to change it. And if we want to move Freeport forward in some areas, we're going to need to do that. And it'll be a hard bullet to bite.
Mr. Chair.
Alderman Keister, we got about 5 minutes left.
Okay, a quick expounding on what Alderman Clum said. We've been doing a lot of work over the past few months to come up with a program to move this town forward, make it more business friendly and stuff. We passed ordinances that are going to help that and stuff. And the thing that we have to look at now is the streets and the infrastructure to move that forward, because if we don't start using those combined, it's not going to work. And as far as I see right now, a few of these projects anyway, we're going to have to start looking at a potential other revenue source to move them forward, because correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Crow, or Manager Crow, when we talked this morning, you said if there wasn't an additional revenue source, it would take approximately 90 years to do the street work that had to be done.
That's correct.
And that, you know, if we want to move this town forward, that's just unacceptable.
Manager Crow, just one final thing, and then I propose in regards to what we're going to do in between now and the next week, but when you have resulting in $300,000 reduction in revenue for fiscal year 2019, is that off of the prior year?
That's off the prior year, and that's based upon the estimates that we have here.
Sure.
You know, and as you asked me why we used a proposed budget, we're trying to be very fiscally conservative here in what our revenues are. So we don't want to build a budget that is automatically, if we have something happen in the state legislature, that is automatically out of balance. So we're trying to use the worst case scenario as we move forward. If the direction from the council is that we go forward and you want us to use what we think that what is the approved budget, problem is IML has not given us their estimates. They normally have their estimates, and that comes from the comptrollers. And everybody's kind of waiting to see what happens with this year's budget, because the governor has proposed another keeping that 10% reduction. So normally we have our estimates from the comptroller and from the IML going forward. We're having to work off of what our best information, but we don't want to build a budget that's out of balance before we even, after we pass it, as soon as the new budget's passed, so.
The 10% reduction was something that was actually implemented in the last budget, but doesn't
Correct.
actually impact us until this next year, correct?
Because of the rolling forward, that's correct.
And the 2% of the revenue process was actually implemented in last year's budget,
correct.
but is also being proposed to continue. So those two are status quo, except status quo is
Well,
going to be.
the 2% fee is already, that's been approved to go
Right.
forward.
So was the 28% reduction in the personal property tax, is that new?
That's been approved.
That's been approved. So all these are based
The
on.
one that has not is the governor has proposed the 10% reduction, but we know we're going to get only 10 payments this year.
Okay, and the only reason we didn't realize that this year is because they made it 14 payments on
Yep.
this one.
That's correct.
Otherwise, we would have been in the same pain
That's
this
correct.
year. Okay. We've got 2 minutes left on this. What I'd suggest is, obviously, we're meeting next week in regards to this. We're going to have, I think Manager Crow indicates we have a limited cow already, so we can dedicate a large portion of this to the budget. You've seen some of the revenue projections, you've seen some of the recommendations regarding capital projects. I think let's come back and kind of see what our thoughts are on certain ones of these, and go from there, unless anyone else has
And
different.
I owe an answer to Alderman Chesney on why the reduction. I'll do a deep dive on that and come back with you at the cow on why we're actually seeing the reduction in revenue that we've seen over the last 3 years.
Thank you.
Anything further for the budget discussion items, basically 7, 8, 9, and 10? Okay, hearing none. Approval of schedule, you see the schedule on there. Next week at 5 o'clock, the following Monday at 5 o'clock, and then as needed, an additional finance cow on March 26th at 5 o'clock, targeting the public hearing for April 2nd and targeted approval on April 16th. Anybody have any objection to that proposed schedule?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I make a motion for acceptance of that schedule as stated.
Second.
All right, there's a motion to approve the scheduled meetings made by Alderperson Bradshaw, seconded by Alderman Keister. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Public comments on this financial committee of the whole meeting.
Could I do it?
Sure, Alderman Clem.
One thing I think too, keep in mind that over the past couple years, or the past couple budget times with the city manager here, keep in mind we've done a budget in a matter of few weeks where we've seen the numbers and gone through it, and we'll be able to take a look at it and approve it, rather than what we did a matter of a number of years ago and sit there and go back and forth on this for 6 months and all the numbers change. So I think it's very important that, you know, we've gotten this, and it might not be what we want to see, okay, but you know, that's where it's at. So I think we've got time, as long as we've worked last time on it and got together. Someplace in here is a happy medium. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, but I really like that it's been moved forward to where, you know, months period of time, we're gonna have this done. Thank you for indulging.
Any additional public comments? You were under 3 minutes, by the way.
Okay, thank
Good
you.
job. Okay, hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right, motion by Alderman Keister, seconded by Alderman Clem. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
This meeting's adjourned. Thank you. We will commence the other one in about 5 minutes. All right.
I heard it go clunk. How long did it give us for recess?
5 minutes, I think.
Oh, well, that's where we had it last year. It's called the Globe Room. Yeah. Globe Room, and then the things are just separated, and then there's a little divider, and then when they take that apart, it's one big one.
And I just want to tell you that Blake was inappropriate to children.
No.
Should not have been.
Yeah, good, I'm looking forward to it.
Who else is coming? Normally.
Good. I enjoyed it.
I'm not sure if that's all good. Ready? Because
I've done that twice. Yes, I have the same position.
okay.
Yeah.
Like I was mommy. That much. We had a good turnout. I'd say like 60 to 70, but we had like
Run out to the car.
Yeah, because it's going, that's our projection.
separated. So,
Tom, can't complain, buddy. I mean, because I've heard so much complaints.
Yeah. We haven't got anything, to complain about. People say to me, oh my God, it must a piece of cake, you know, I mean.
My blood pressure out.
We've got, I'll go for the,
What did you do for yourself? Yeah, no, Jeremy told me last week, people are calling up to check, it's a drain eye check. Well, he's really done a good job of it. We have a lot of respect for him.
Yeah, I mean, sensible and respectful to the minutes. But that David Whitehead, let's touch him out there.
He like to punch you right upside the snot locker, you know? Oh, yeah.
Hey, it was that. Yeah, you know, what I did is, that's right. We went back and forth. Then he stayed in his truck. I said, well, you said truck, get out your truck. I said, well, good. Wear your big boy underwear because you're going to need it. Yeah, I mean, we have to understand. So, but, hey. But everything, otherwise everything was great.
You need batteries?
I have one. I have one. It's a triple.
Oh, okay. Okay. Oh, for the little guy, okay.
This right here, I ain't even looked at it. Oh, the new guy. I find it too. But the only way, yeah, seriously, well, no, they already touched. Yeah. Ain't beat that.
Pastor Dan, could you lead an invocation, please?
I have a scripture to share. It's in Proverbs 3, verses 5 and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths. Father, I just thank you for every city leader that has been put into place with a purpose. I just thank you that as each leader draws upon relationship with you, that there's a grace. There's a grace over the work that they're performing. There's a grace and a protection over every family. And I just thank you that you are honored in this city. And I thank you that this city has wonderful opportunities ahead of it because of leadership who is trusted in you and in your name. And so, Father, I am just so very grateful to be a part of this city and to honor the members here, really just because it's all about you. And in this life, we just dedicate the work and the service that we do to what you've already done for us through Jesus. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you. So now we'll call this meeting to order. Madam Clerk, would you please take the roll?
Mayor Miller,
Here.
Alderpersons McLanathan,
Here.
Ross,
Here.
Smith, Busker,
Here.
Brashaw,
Here.
Keister,
Here.
Chesney,
Here.
and Clem.
Here.
Thank you. Alderman McLanathan, can you lead us?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, the first item is the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion for the approval?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion made by Alderman Busker, seconded by Alderman Keister for the approval of the agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes. Item number 2 is the approval of the minutes from February 20th, 2018. Is there a motion for this approval?
So moved.
Second it.
We have a motion made by Alderperson Brashaw, seconded by Alderman Ross for the approval of the minutes. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes. Is there any public comment? Okay, thank you very much. Then we will move on to item number 4, which is the consent agenda. All the items on the consent agenda are considered to be routine in nature unless there's a member of the council that would like to have something removed for further discussion. Is there any item for further discussion? Seeing none, the consent agenda consists of the adoption of Resolution R 2018-11, temporary closure of streets for the annual Memorial Day Parade on May 28th, 2018. The approval of finance bills payable in the total of $300,654.80. The approval of payroll for ending February 23rd, 2018 in the total of $482,172.82, and to receive and place on file building permits March 2018. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So move.
Second.
We have a motion made by Alderman Keister, seconded by Alderman Busker for the approval of the consent agenda. Madam Clerk, could you please take the roll?
McClanathan.
Aye.
Ross.
Aye.
Smith.
Aye.
Busker.
Aye.
Brashaw.
Aye.
Keister.
Aye.
Chesney.
Aye.
And Clem.
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
If I could please have all of the bowlers and their coaches step forward. If you want to just form a line here and face the camera, because I'm sure that the viewing audience would like to see all of your faces. Thank you. So tonight I have the pleasure of reading an honorary resolution to recognize the Freeport Pretzel High School boys bowling team in the city of Freeport. Whereas Freeport School District number 145 encourages students to engage in athletic competition and to develop their individual and team skills. And whereas the Freeport High School boys bowling team completed a successful 2017-2018 bowling season as second place finishers in the IHSA Boys Bowling State Finals held on January 26th and 27th, 2018. And whereas this team also took first place in the Lake Park Tournament and the Dixon Toughman Tournament, and first place at regionals and fourth place at sectionals. And whereas the Freeport Pretzel boys bowling team consists of team players Eric Elber, Kane Kalati, Ty Kalati, Julian Dyson, Dylan Holbert, Chris Keeney, Jaden Middlestead, Owen Saxby, and are to be congratulated on their teamwork and a job well done. And whereas the Freeport High School bowling team head coach John Krieger and assistant coaches Dennis Enders and Bob Keeling deserve recognition for their guiding their team to success. And whereas the entire Freeport community is proud of the Freeport boys bowlers for their outstanding athletic achievements. Now therefore be it resolved by the City Council and the Mayor of the City of Freeport, Illinois, that we recognize and commend the Freeport boys bowling team for their accomplishments as exemplary members of the Freeport community, their teamwork and commitment to excellence, and hereby wish them continued success in the years to come. So congratulations, boys.
Madam Mayor, we're also blessed with having Thomas Endrest here, assistant coach for the Highland team that won nationals yesterday, but I'm sure we're going to have them back. But great job, Thomas. Okay. God bless.
Okay, so next we have the recognition of service awards.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. All right. First one up is Christopher Tempa. He has 10 years of service here. I gotta, I'm just 10 years of service.
Congratulations, Christopher. There you go.
Chris serves on our Florida Fire Tax Board and also has been real active with our new turnout committee for our gear and our personal protective equipment. So we really appreciate everything Chris has brought to the department and what he continues to do for us. And we have 20 more years to give now.
Thanks, Chris.
Ooh.
Congratulations. Item number 7 is the second reading of ordinance 2018-11. Madam Clerk, could you please read this for the record?
An ordinance amending individual provisions of chapters 1040, 1042, 1044, 1048, 1052, and 1060 of the codified ordinances of Freeport pertaining to municipal utility services, billing, and collection procedures.
Manager Crowe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is I will point out to council that we did make one amendment to this from when it was previously presented to you on first reading. After discussion between myself, Attorney Roxanne, and Steve, we're going to need to, and once we pass the ordinance, once we pass the budget, we'll have to pass the billing ordinance. So we've pulled those billing tables out of that to make sure that it reflects an actual what's going on with our billing for the future and set a baseline as we go forward. So we've pulled those out, but this sets up procedures to do notification for turnoff, and then it's notification that they're late, and then turnoff procedures, changing the late notification to 10 days after they have any residents outside the billing period, and then a 5-day notification after we do a door hanger. And the door hanger, Steve and I went through and approved the language for the door hanger today. So it'll go, we'll have that ready to go to say that they're going to be shut off. Understanding the one thing that was brought to my attention on this ordinance, I want to make sure it's clear that it says it will be shut off in 5 days after that door hanger's placed, but it gives the department a little bit of leeway that it doesn't initially have to do it. So if we have multiple turnoffs in that day, they may not be able to get to them until the next day. It says will be shut off at 5 days, but they may get the shutoffs done within the 5 days within the department after that 5-day period. So there's a little bit of leeway. I just wanted to make sure that was pointed out by Tom to me. So that's not a change that was in the ordinance, but that's the change on this ordinance as we go forward. We're hoping that this shortening in period doesn't see these large bills. Now, I know a question came up about snowbirds that are leaving their water on and not continue to build and with the late notice. What I recommend for anybody that's leaving the area for a large period of time is go ahead and contact the water and sewer department, say you're going to be leaving it. They'll can set up a way to either pay it, or you're notifying them that that's a temporary period, so you are not getting your water shut off as a late notice. That is part of this ordinance, so that the notification process as we go forward with that. So are there any questions?
Yes,
Mayor?
Mayor?
Alderman Bradshaw.
Thank you. Yeah, Manager Crowe, I have a few questions. I do understand that the door hanger is at the 5-day notice, and I told you I approved of that. We talked about this at length. But will the OOR, the owner of record, be notified if this is a property that's either for sale or it's a rental property? Will there be a notification to like a landlord or somebody other? Because if the door hanger's put on and say it's a house for sale or somebody has abandoned the house, I was just wondering if there'd be other notification the water would be shut off.
That's currently not in the ordinance, but we can make sure that can be done in the future.
At the council's pleasure, hopefully. And then my other question is, maybe as a possible recommendation for solution for the snowbirds or people that are leaving, if the water department probably already does it, explains to them that they could set up an ACH, an automatic checking or savings withdrawal. I'm not sure who I'm supposed to be looking at.
Well, I was looking at Financial Director Bucus and myself. That's the way we're actually paying our bills right now, is through ACH transfer. So that's an ability to do an ACH transfer. There's also online billing we do. They can pay it online if they require it.
And one small follow-up. And also along that line, perhaps a pay-ahead program. Do they allow people to prepay on a billing, say put $300 forward on a bill?
Tom?
Oh, yes, we have that capability.
You have a prepay program?
Well, I'll check to see if there's a program in place, but we are able to go and have credits available if there was an overpayment, and it reflects on the bill in our records.
Without them just sending it right back? Because I know some bills, if you prepay, they'll bounce it right back at you within a couple of weeks time frame.
Well, I was working in the office last week, and I know that I received a check of like $500-600, and the payment was only maybe $150. So that was brought on in, and that was recorded, and there may have been some indication as far as that they're a snowbird. So we just process the payment, and there's an outstanding credit, so that will work itself down.
Alderman Brashaw,
yes,
Attorney Sosnowski has a response for you.
I just wanted to respond to the question that you brought up regarding the notice. There is actually language in the ordinance that provides for essentially two notices. One does go directly out after the payment is, or there isn't a payment made, and it's essentially a notice of disconnection. Okay. So that would go to the customer, and then there's also the posting. So between the two pieces, most municipalities hope that they can catch everyone that way, but there'd be the 10-day notice and then the posting.
And the 10-day notice does go out to the owner of the property.
Okay, that's required under
That's
state
required, and it's required by state law too. So.
Thank you very much. And hopefully with the snowbird situation, a lot of people that travel, I mean, they can usually afford to pay ahead or set up an ACH program. Thank you.
Mayor?
Alderman Keister?
Yes, thank you. I received a phone call today from a constituent asking that very question, and that's why I talked to Manager Lowell about it. And I understand the solution, but what I think we need to do is either periodically put something in the water bill or periodically put something in the paper to notify these people that this is how they can do it to keep their water from being shut off, because otherwise how are they going to know that these options are available to them? So we've got to have some way to be able to notify them periodically that, yeah, if you're going to take off 30, 60, 90 days, this is what you have to do, or you're going to come back and your water's probably not going to be on. I'd like to see something like that, either set up or proposed or whatever, so we could get that out to the public.
Thank you. Further questions?
Mayor?
Alderman McClanathan.
Thank you. So the way I read it, it says in subparagraph C, you got 15 days from mailing initially. And if it's not paid within 10, then you get the 5-day notice on it. So we're talking 30 days from mailing at the fastest. You got your 15 from mailing. If you didn't pay for 10, then you got 5 days. So it's a 30-day period.
No, correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, but so the notice goes out. That 15-day mailing is basically say you're going to process. That 10-day notice is from the time that letter is stamped from going out. So your 10 days, that 15 days encompasses both the shut off as well as the letter.
So what's the amount of days? All right,
It's
bill
15
goes
days.
out.
It's 15 days from the end of the billing period, from the date. That 15 days to your water shut off starts from the date stamp of it leaving the post office.
Okay, but so again, like the bill goes out.
Bill goes out. You have,
and it says this is the end of my cycle, and I realize you got various.
Yeah, 15. Is it 15 days, Tom, to pay the bill after it goes out?
City Manager Crowe, I have it pulled up if that helps.
Yeah, thank you, Roxanne.
I think that actually, Alderman, I think you're correct, because there's a period of 10 days which will pass after the bill is late. After the period of that 10 days, then a delinquent notice is sent, which date is not less than 15 days after the date of the mailing. So that's a 15-day period. And then the city posts the property not less than 5 days prior to the date of for disconnection.
Okay.
So 10 days, then the notice goes out, 15 days, then posting, then the 5 days for posting.
Okay. Follow-up, Mayor? All right, so you've got approximately a month period, and that's the fastest of which there would be a shut-off.
Approximately.
Approximately a month. What are we dealing with in past practice here for, on a very average, so this is going to be a very approximate figure, what's the point that we've been shutting off at?
About 100 days.
Okay. And that's 100, that practice has led to approximately how much in unpaid bills right now?
We have outstanding close to $1 million to $1.2 million.
Additional follow-up, Mayor? All right, so under current practice of approximately 100 days, a little over 3 months for the average shut-off, we're basically in a situation where taxpayers are, footing the bill, if you will, at the end of the day.
And there, yes, that's correct. There are some other guidelines we have to follow, like if the temperature stays below 32 degrees for a period of, it's a period of a 30-day period, we can't shut off water during that period. If there are some other regulations, like if you're a disabled vet with more than 50% disability, we can't shut your water off.
Is there a reason you looked at me when you
No, I didn't mean to, Tom. So there are other reasons we can't shut off. But what we're finding is that at the end of that 100 days, it's amazing. I wish Diane was here. How many people come in and Tom and ask us to set up a payment plan to pay off their bill over the next 3.5 months. So, the idea is that we're shortening down, make a smaller bill so that, there's really gives us an opportunity to address these issues and also take care, so people are not, this is a service that we're providing everybody. It is a business, so a business activity, and it has to be treated somewhat as a business activity.
Mayor?
Member Clathan.
Thank you. And just reading the exact language, it says, if any amounts due pursuant to an aggregate bill, including any late charges due thereupon, remain unpaid for a period of 10 days after the due date set forth on the aggregate bill. What's the approximate time that we're given from someone on a bill goes out and when it's due?
Right now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so bill goes out to 20 days.
Okay, so it's not just a 30-day window. I mean, you got your initial period, and then it's this period of time on there. Right.
Mayor?
Alderman Chesney.
Thank you. Tom, question for you. Are we 100% sure we're now charging late fees? And I know you're going to say, well, of course we are, and laugh, but historically we haven't been charging late fees even though it was written in our ordinance. Are you certain that late fees are being assessed for late payers?
Well, and, since I've come on board, late fees, that's the direction I've given.
So the answer, you're certain that we're doing that?
That's correct.
Okay.
And can I follow up on that, Mayor? So one of the things that Steve and I discovered in reviewing the ordinance is the way we calculated late fees were not clear, because what it was it said, all right, you'll be paid what was on your water bill. If you paid it on time, we took 10% off your water bill, and then your late fee was added on to that, was actually the full water bill. So what we've done is said, and what I found out in practice is that we were actually adding 10% onto the water bill as the late fee. So what we've done, what they were doing was it was a water bill, and then they would add 10%. So now the ordinance actually reflects what we were doing in practice.
That's always a good thing. And then follow-up, Mayor?
Yes.
And kind of piggybacking on what Peter had to say, when it comes to discretion, if somebody was to contact the Water and Sewer Department and fell in a hardship, you're comfortable that this ordinance gives you some discretion to make business decisions for the city and that we're not going to be shutting off people's water in the event of medical condition or something like that?
So there is actually, in the letter that we've drafted, which I've sent the language down to the Water and Sewer Department, it actually says they have the right to appeal to the city manager if there is a hardship or if they have something problem to override the late fee as well as the shut off of water.
Okay. That's fair.
Manager Crowe, do you need to have something for an amendment on that fee
Yes,
structure?
I do, Madam Mayor. So it needs to, we need to amend it from the first reading to take the water rate tables out of it.
So is there a motion to receive the fee structure as amended?
So move.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion made by Alderman Clem, seconded by Alderman Busker for the amendment for the fee structure concerning ordinance 2018-11. Madam Clerk, could you take the roll on this motion, please?
McClanathan.
Aye.
Ross.
Aye.
Smith. Busker.
Aye.
Brashaw.
Aye.
Keister.
Aye.
Chesney.
Aye.
Clem.
Aye.
The amendment passes 8-0.
Thank you. So then is there any further discussion to the ordinance 2018-11 as amended? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, could you please take the roll on the final passage of ordinance 2018-11 as amended?
McClanathan.
Aye.
Ross.
Aye.
Smith. Busker.
Aye.
Brashaw.
Aye.
Keister.
Aye.
Chesney.
Aye.
Clem.
Aye.
And the ordinance passes 8-0 as amended.
Thank you. Item number 8 is the second reading of ordinance 2018-12. Could you please read this for the record?
An ordinance amending the codified ordinances of the City of Freeport regarding the regulation of alcoholic liquor and mechanical electronic gaming.
Thank you. Manager Crowe or Attorney Cox?
I'll turn it over to Attorney Cox at this point.
Thank you. I think the last council meeting I was requested to add some additional language or provide some sample language around the idea of surveillance cameras at drive-up windows. And provided that to council, that's the only change from, or even suggested change from the first read. So I'd be happy to answer any questions or.
Mayor?
Alderman Chesney?
Has there been any dialogue with anybody that would be impacted by this, Steve, that any concerns, heartburn, protests, anything?
Well, the entire process was conducted in conjunction with the licensees. They were all invited to take part in the process and worked with the Liquor Commission. There were several public meetings, so we feel that not only does this not negatively impact the licensees, they were actually a part of the process.
Mayor.
Alderman Keister?
Since we asked for that amendment, has the businesses been contacted about the fact that we want to maybe put that in there and they have a camera on the window?
There's been no specific discussion about that.
Okay.
Mayor?
Alderman Chesney?
Thank you. Attorney Cox, have any licensees spoke out in opposition of this ordinance, to your knowledge?
No.
Mayor?
Alderman Keister?
Yeah, personally, I would feel more comfortable if we did put that amendment in there, requiring a video camera on the window. That would help minimize any possibility of foul or anything, and if there is foul, proof for it. So I would like to make a motion that we add the amendment, and I don't know, just a couple sentences here. Sell any liquor using drive-up or drive-through window unless such window is equipped with recording security camera of a type and placement approved by the Chief of Police and maintained and operated in a manner consistent with Section 874.13C of these codified ordinances. I'd like to make a motion that be added to the ordinance.
Second.
Chief Barklow, I know the last time when your opinion was that you weren't too worried about surveillance cameras. Have you changed your mind?
No, I haven't. I just wondered if it's going to be approved by me. Do you want the surveillance on the clerk, or is it kind of out the window that Because when we've ever been contacted by drive-up windows, and there's been very, very few times that we've had any complaints or anything, it's generally the workers at the drive-up window that will call us and to alert us that they've seen something illegal in the car. So those are the times we've ever really dealt with any kind of drive-up window type of a situation. But you're thinking more of a kind of what's going out the window is your concern, is that
That's
right?
basically my concern, yes.
Okay. Okay. I just if we're going to set the cameras up, we want to make sure that we're capturing what the council wants me to capture.
And Mayor, if I may follow up.
Alderman Keister.
And I guess this concern is coming from the fact that many years ago I worked in an establishment, again, it was in another state that had drive-up windows, and I know some of the things that went on there and stuff, and I just think it would be prudent for us to put the camera there just so that I think just having the camera there itself would be enough deterrent to keep anything from that happening, and if it did happen, then we've got the proof for it. It's going to be a minimal expense to the business, and I think it would be an enhancement to keep the trouble down and make sure that it's operating the way it's supposed to be.
Well, then before you is a motion made by Alderman Keister, seconded by Alderman Chesney to add an amendment for surveillance cameras to this liquor code. Is there any further discussion on the surveillance camera only? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, could you please take the roll on the amendment?
McClanathan.
Aye.
Ross.
Aye.
Smith.
Aye.
Busker.
Aye.
Brashaw.
Aye.
Keister.
Aye.
Chesney.
Aye.
Clem.
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
Thank you. So then now before you is for the passage of ordinance 2018-12 as amended with a surveillance camera. Is there any further discussion on this ordinance? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, could you please take the roll?
McClanathan.
Aye.
Ross.
Aye.
Smith.
Aye.
Busker.
Aye.
Brashaw.
Aye.
Keister.
Aye.
Chesney.
Aye.
Clem.
Aye.
And the ordinance passes as amended 8-0.
Thank you, Attorney Cox, for all the work you did on that.
Yeah, good job.
Thank you.
Item number 9 is the second reading of ordinance 2018-13. Madam Clerk, could you please read this for the record?
An ordinance amending the codified ordinances of Freeport regarding parklets and sidewalk cafes.
Manager Crowe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is another ordinance that came out of the Liquor Commission discussion. As we talked about previously, the idea was that the cafes, sidewalk cafes, and the parklets would be very easy to process, streamline once you already have your liquor ordinance, or correction, your liquor license, that it would go through review and be approved at my level. What we found is the first one we went through with Mort's, we actually had to have a special use permit because of the way our ordinances were written. This will modify that and really meet what we believe was the council's intent for sidewalk cafes and parklets.
Any further discussion on this ordinance? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, could you please take the roll on the passage of ordinance 2018-13?
McClanathan.
Aye.
Ross.
Aye.
Smith.
Aye.
Busker.
Aye.
Brashaw.
Aye.
Keister.
Aye.
Chesney.
Aye.
And Clem.
Aye.
Ordinance passes 8-0.
Thank you. Item number 10 is the first reading of ordinance 2018-14. Madam Clerk, could you please read this for the record?
An ordinance of the City of Freeport approving a business district plan for the Galena Corridor Business District project area in the city.
Manager Crowe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As you know, we've been in ongoing discussions with the owner of Parkview Plaza for the redevelopment agreement. As part of that, Ellers looked at the feasibility of creating a TIF district, found that it was not feasible. We have also been approached by several other businesses along this area, to include Royal Pub, the owner of Royal Pub, the owner of Ann's, the bowling alley, about coming up with redevelopment agreements in here. We believe that the business district is the best way to go forward. This will add an additional 1 cent or 1% tax that will then can be returned back to those businesses as a redevelopment agreement under the redevelopment agreement. We are going to do a public hearing, and you'll see that later on, and we are going to notify all the businesses in this area. What's that? It's done. It's done. Okay, we've already notified all the businesses in the area that we're going to have a public hearing on this, and we'll get that feedback from them. But we have had discussions with them. So this is the best way we believe that we can do the redevelopment agreement. I know Sullivan's, we are working, Aaron's working the redevelopment agreement right now with them to get the details out. But the business district gives us another tool that we can use going forward. This is strictly a first reading. We'll have a public hearing, and we'll have the cow, so we can discuss this further. The public hearing has to be 10 days after passing the public hearing ordinance, which is the last ordinance. So with that, I'll stand by for any questions.
Questions?
Madam Mayor?
Alderman Clem.
Just a point here, when Manager Crow and I talked last week about this, keep in mind the 1% sales tax is on non-food items. So take for granted at Sullivan's store, your prices of grocery wouldn't go up by 1% on tax. It would be non-food items, so.
Mayor.
Alderman McClanathan.
Thank you. So just to summarize, it creates, and in some of these ordinances that we're going to be discussing here, it gives the boundaries, the PIN numbers and things of that nature for that district. So we've got the district. In that one district, there's an additional 1% sales tax on certain items. And again, there's a laundry list of excluded items, as Alderman Clem was getting to. The money that's generated by that 1% is then used to fund and repay redevelopment agreements for redevelopment within the business district. And then finally, what happens when you've got the tax on there, but let's say that the tax is in excess or the revenue generated from the tax is in excess of payments for an RDA. Does it continue to accumulate a balance that can then be used for, is it solely RDAs, or is there infrastructure that you can do within that? What are the limits?
Business district is strictly for the RDAs. It's not for the use on infrastructure within those areas. So these are strictly within for the promotion of RDAs. So where we have it, we have, and so one of the things difference with business districts is on the RDAs, it strictly goes, they get the money that is strictly generated by their group of properties. So in the case of Sullivan's and Parkview, he only gets the money that is generated by his piece of property, so that it encourages them to promote growth within their company. We actually have, right now, we have a letter of intent from 2 other developers in this area. One is the developer that wants to redevelop the Eagles, and another one's for another that's looking at another piece of property on that that says, if we can get this business district passed and they can close on their property, they'll move forward and redevelop these properties. And it has the same length that a TIF district does. It's 23 years, but it's very specific. It does not hurt. It's strictly within the council because it does not take money from the other taxing districts.
Mayor?
Alderman Keister.
Yeah, just real quickly, who determines, is there a body that determines who gets the money? Is there criteria or anything in writing that describes what they get the money for?
This body determines. We draft the RDA proposal, gone through the negotiations, and then this body here approves that redevelopment agreement.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Chesney.
Thank you. Director McDonald, could you send the council a list of anybody that would be impacted, all the businesses? Could you send us a list of that, please?
Any further discussion?
Mayor.
Alderman Smith.
So are the items that are listed in the ordinance, are they the only items or the only products that wouldn't be subject to this 1% sales tax? Because I'm reading it through, it says, prescription, non-prescription medicine, drugs, medical appliances, modifications to a motor vehicle for purposes of rendering it usable by a disabled person, yada, yada, and so on, so on. So alcoholic beverages would be subject,
Yes, alcoholic beverages would be subject.
and the duration is 23 years.
23 years.
And if I understand you correctly, the particular business subject to this tax would have access to only those funds generated by the sales by that business. Is that correct?
That's the way we're currently drafting the current RDA. And we believe that that's the way, the recommendation from Aaron going forward is that we stay consistent within the area.
So there's no commingling or sharing of revenues by...
That's correct.
Okay. So that's already predetermined by this body. Okay. Thank you.
Mayor,
Alderman Keister.
motion to move it forward.
Second.
We have a motion made by Alderman Keister, seconded by Alderman Smith to move ordinance 2018-14 onto the next regularly scheduled council meeting. Is there any further questions before we move on?
Mayor,
Alderman McClanahan.
thank you. Just trying to get my hands around, the 1% tax is for any business within that district, correct?
That's correct.
And the way we're currently crafting the RDA is they get reimbursed pursuant to an RDA for the portion that comes from their business.
That's correct.
What happens to the other 1%?
The other one is held, and then we can come up with in the future on how we want to distribute that money, whether it's distributed back to the businesses, but we want to make sure that we're at the end of the period of time of the RDA, of the business district. But we want to make sure that the businesses that are coming in with the RDAs are promoting their own businesses.
So there will be surplus on it, and it may then an additional RDA, some of those funds. But when we're, for instance, let's say business X comes on in, and they're located in the district, and this has been in place for 2 years, and there's $300,000 sitting in there. The precedent we're setting with what we want in the first RDA is you're getting money based on what you're doing.
It's your development.
Are we going to be using some of that pool of money for maybe Project X, Business X, Business Y down the road?
What we can do is we can use it, we will use that, have that available, but we can also use it for any additional economic development within that district if this body approves it.
Okay.
Does that?
Yeah, I see. I think how we're going to go with that down the road. But
Further questions? Seeing none, we will move on to item number 11, which is the first reading of ordinance 2018-15. Madam Clerk, would you please read this for the record?
An ordinance of the City of Freeport designating the Galena Corridor Business District for the city.
Manager Crowe.
This is the formal description of the business district, legally described as the West Galena Avenue Business District. And this contains 68 acres and 48 parcels within the area. And this designates the streets and size of that. You have the legal description. Basically, Nancy, Kurt, you're the one that helped put this map together. So right from the first business, it goes up to Ann's, and then down to the end of the Sullivan's Parkview Plaza.
Madam Mayor,
Questions? Alderman Clem.
motion to move it forward?
Second.
We have a motion made by Alderman Clem, seconded by Alderman Keister to move ordinance 2018-15 onto the next regularly scheduled council meeting. Is there any further questions on this ordinance? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, no, I guess we're good there. So we will move on to item number 12, which is the first reading of ordinance 2018-16. Could you please read this for the record?
An ordinance of the City of Freeport imposing a business district retailer's occupation tax and a business district service occupation tax within the Galena Corridor Business District.
Thank you. Manager Crowe.
Yes, this is the ordinance that it actually establishes that 1% tax and says that it will be used for RDAs and for further business growth within the corridor. So that is, so this is a service occupation tax. So this is actually the tax establishing that 1%.
Questions? Alderman Keister.
Motion to approve, or move it forward.
Is there a second?
I'll second it, sure.
Is this
No, next one.
next one?
Mayor?
Alderman McClanathan.
Thank you. Manager Crowe, through the Ellers study and your professional experience, what has been the track record of these business districts throughout the state in the areas that they've been put into place? What are some of the not so good stories? Or again, what's the general track record?
General track record is they are very successful. They've been used in redeveloping the old malls, particularly old business districts that are not turning the amount of tax increment financing around, because it encourages and forces the developer to look at the best and use of that property as they redevelop it. So it encourages them to say, what is going to bring the best business to us, what's going to bring the most taxes, because they're getting the money from those taxes. They may set a limit on it, but they only get that money. And as the person who's redeveloping Eagles say, you can't be a successful businessman and sell the things that you can buy on Amazon in today's world. So I've got to go out and find things that are not being sold on Amazon to be successful. That encourages them. The downside is that it is as we go forward is if the business goes, if they don't do the best and best use of the business, and they make a commitment financially to it, they may not get the return they expect. You know, the key is when we're developing the RDA, one of the businesses wanted us to upfront $5 million to them, and what that was no encouragement for them to use this as the best use. So we said, no, we would not do that. You can upfront the money, and then we'll put this in the RDA that will the waterfall for taxes as a percentage sales tax, so that it encourages them to look at what the businesses they're doing, so they're just not filling storefronts.
Follow up, Mayor?
Alderman McClanathan.
Have any communities seen an adverse impact, for instance, where you've got, let's say, a gas station near the border of a business district, and then a block away outside of the district, a gas station? Have there been any case studies or things of that nature showing a negative impact for a business district in that nature?
I have not seen any studies. I can go out to Ellers and ask them if they've seen any other circumstances of that. I don't know. Roxanne, have you seen anything along that lines?
I have not seen any studies which would indicate that it has a negative impact on businesses inside the district as opposed to businesses outside the district. And if you think about it for a minute, the imposition of the tax is so small that when you're going to fill your car up with gas, or when you're going to, pick up something, are you thinking in your mind, if I go to this gas station, I'm going to pay an additional, 1% tax?
Are you going to make me answer that?
No, I'm just saying that
I second that.
We're talking about the ordinary person.
the average person does not take that into consideration. I know that when we're looking at, and I've had this conversation actually on panels that I've sat on before with companies like Ehlers for the Illinois Municipal League, when we're looking at the difference in sales tax community to community, what we may see then is if one community charges 5% for a sales tax and another community charges 8 or 10, that sometimes a consumer will make decisions based off of that large of a discrepancy in a difference in the sales tax that's being charged, but usually not with the imposition of a business district. The difference is just so small that it really doesn't make that much of a difference. And then to Manager Crow's point with regard to the establishment of the district itself and whether or not it can be seen as a benefit or not, years ago, communities used to do the upfront funding of projects as was originally proposed, and that created, I think, some negative light for both TIF districts and business districts. Now, with communities shifting to pay as you go, it's the best way to make sure that the dollars are actually being spent for a legitimate project that is necessary to grow the area and provide funding so it can look its best.
Final follow-up. Thank you.
Alderman Clanathan.
And along those lines, looking at some of the other proposals whereby there had been significant upfront risk to the city and things of that nature, under this business district, what risk is there to the city on these RDAs?
So the RDAs, as we're going forward, we're making sure that we have minimized the risk to us, to the taxpayers' money. In the past, we've had some RDAs that put the city in an untenable situation. The other thing is we're putting in the RDA that particularly we're putting in the RDAs you cannot protest your property tax as you go forward, because we've had businesses that have gotten the RDAs, then protested their property tax, brought their increment below, affected the whole TIF district, and not given us the return that we thought on the TIF district. So the recommendation, we've gone out to other communities and said, all right, what have you done? So you said, as part of the RDAs, we're saying, you can't protest your property tax as long as you're receiving money from us. That's some of the things we're doing. You're going to see that they're much tighter. We don't give up the money up front. They have to come to us with receipts, proof of that they're actually using the money to where they're supposed to and not recycling it. That's another thing that I've seen in a previous community is they took the money and then put it in a different community that they had another project that was under where, because the money was given up front, that's one of the things, the protections that we're building into this RDA. So,
thank you.
Mayor, go ahead, Tom.
Okay, Madam Mayor.
Alderman Clem.
Just a quick one. To keep in mind, this has been in the background that you guys have been negotiating this for a considerable amount of time, and there's been a lot of real good discussion put into it and a lot of options. You might remember a couple years ago they took a look at doing a similar situation downtown, and it didn't fly. It was everybody didn't buy in, and there were some different things involved. My son-in-law happens to work for a company that bonds many old malls and things of that sort. I believe this business district setup is a real advantageous thing for them, because to go out and put some of the property on the market and so on and so forth is going to be a lot tougher job to do than this is going to be a direct line of money to help them out with their redevelopment.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, we have a motion made by Alderman Keister, seconded by Alderman Smith, to move ordinance 2018-16 on to the next regularly scheduled city council meeting. Item number 13 is the first reading of ordinance 2018-17. Madam Clerk, would you please read this for the record?
An ordinance of the City of Freeport proposing the approval of a business district plan and designation of a business district and fixing the time and place for a public hearing on the proposal to approve a business district plan, designate a business district area, and impose additional retailers' occupational taxes and service occupational taxes therein.
Manager Crowe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, under the business district, we are required to hold a public meeting and notify all the businesses within the business district that we are holding that public meeting, as you heard. We have done that. We have to pass this ordinance, so I'm asking for the waiving the rules, because we have to have the hearing 10 days after passing, but we have to have the hearing prior to passing the business district. The passing of the business district is basically driving the Sullivan the Parkview RDA, not a fault of ours, it took us this long to come to an agreement with him that by waiving the rules on this, this is only waiving the rules so we can hold the hearing on the 15th, and so we can have an input from all the businesses that I can bring back to the council, that they're aware of what their concerns are and impacts are. There's a requirement that we have 10 days prior to the hearing, we go out with a newspaper notice. Journal Standard's ready to go with that. Tomorrow, if this is approved, and then, 3 days later, we have to send out a second notice of the public hearing. We'll hold the public hearing at 5:30 on Thursday, the 15th, here in City Hall, if the council approves it.
Mayor?
Alderman Chesney.
Thank you. Director McDonald, when were the businesses notified of this? 'Cause
We sent the letters out today, so it would actually be the businesses and then the property owners as well.
Okay, follow up, Mayor. I guess my only hesitation would be is there a reason, Manager Crowe, that we spent months, I know this has been discussed internally, but we spent months discussing liquor ordinances and kicked that around, for 6 months, and this is a pretty big impact on the area that, businesses haven't even been notified yet. Today, they're still not notified. So they're not going to be notified till maybe the 8th, and then a week later, they're going to have to render an opinion on this. That just seems to me awfully quick. What's the urgency, I guess? What am I missing?
So the urgency is it took us this long to come to an agreement with the Sullivan's family on Parkview. And part of that RDA is they're asking for the business district to be in place so they can start drawing property tax, the sales tax. The state has to have the business district by 1 April or April 2nd, which is the first Monday, before in place. They have it to meet the requirements of what the Sullivans want in their RDA so that they can start drawing building what their sales tax is going forward. I was not happy with the quickness of this. However, we did not want to institute a business district unless we had a confirmation that we were going to move forward with at least one of the projects in which we had a letter of intent from the developers. So that is the reason. There are given periods of time. It's a 6-month times where the property or the sales tax is 6 or 3 months. I can't remember. Do you remember? 6? Twice a year.
Sorry, it's twice a year that these ordinances are accepted by the state of Illinois. So if they're not received by the first day of April, and then I believe that it's the 1st of September. So if it isn't passed by this month, then it will have to wait until the fall.
Madam
Mayor?
Alderman Clem.
Manager Crowe, last week when we talked, I believe you mentioned to me, though, that many of the major players in this have been told and been discussed it with them?
Yeah, we have been discussing this as an ongoing process and several of them are aware that we were talking about the development of this business district. I cannot say that every single business in the area was, but I know I've talked with John, the owner of the Ann's. In fact, he approached us about making sure. Originally, Ann's was not going to be in the business district. He approached us about putting Ann's in the business district because he wants to resell that and give the ability to redevelop that. The bowling alley, it approached us. The motel in that area has approached us about being involved in this. Every business, we cannot say that we've contacted, but I've had several of the large businesses reach out to us and say they want to move forward with this because they all want to do some type of redevelopment.
So we definitely do not want to have to hold up 6 businesses that have come to us asking for this by waiting until September. So it really is, there is an urgency behind it.
Mayor,
Alderman Keister.
motion to approve.
Motion for suspension of the rules?
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion made by Alderman Keister, seconded by Alderman Ross to move ordinance 2018-17 on to the next regularly scheduled meeting. And we have a motion made by Alderman Clem, seconded by Alderman Keister for the suspension of the rules. The suspension of the rules is non-debatable. It must pass by a 2/3 majority. So, Madam Clerk, would you please take the roll on the suspension of the rules only?
McClanathan.
Aye.
Ross.
Aye.
Smith.
Aye.
Busker.
Aye.
Brashaw.
Aye.
Keister.
Aye.
Chesney.
Aye.
Clem.
Aye.
Passes 8-0.
Thank you. So now before you is the final reading for ordinance 2018-17. Is there any further questions on this ordinance?
Mayor.
Alderman McClanathan.
Thank you. We've had a lot of discussion on various aspects of this, so I just want to reiterate this ordinance that we're looking at suspending the rules is just to set it for a public hearing.
That's correct. Any further questions? Madam Clerk, could you please take the roll on the passage of ordinance 2018-17?
McClanathan.
Aye.
Ross.
Aye.
Smith.
Aye.
Busker.
Aye.
Brashaw.
Aye.
Keister.
Aye.
Chesney.
Aye.
Clem.
Aye.
And that ordinance passes 8-0.
Thank you.
Aye.
Yes.
So I will personally, what we'll do is, since we've now already set the letters, we'll make sure we make phone contact with all the businesses out there as well to make sure that they are aware.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 14 is the adoption of resolution 2018-12. Madam Clerk, could you please read this for the record?
A resolution authorizing application to Powering Safe Communities Municipal Grant Program provided by ComEd and Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus.
Director McDonald.
Thank you. This particular grant proposal will allow for the purchase of one, is it Zoll? Zoll Auto Pulse machine, which is a CPR machine for the fire department. We do have a 50% match, and they'll pay for up to $10,000 towards the purchase of the equipment. So $62,1099 would be our cash match, and then we're also going to provide an in-kind match of $37.89 from the budgeted training line item. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Chief A?
No, we've pursued a couple grants with these in mind. They provide a certain amount of safety for the firefighters while in transit, especially doing CPR. So it's beneficial for the patient. The mortality rates are shown to increase with having this type of CPR done. And in the midst of the transport, our firefighters can remain seat belted, where typically on a cardiac arrest call, they're continuing the CPR en route and are have the potential to get thrown around in the back of the ambulance. So.
Mayor.
Alderman Keister.
Two things real quickly. We already have the money budgeted for this, or that has to be budgeted in the new budget? How is that?
We would have it in our existing budget.
Existing budget, okay. And follow-up, Mayor?
Alderman Keister.
Just from personal experience, I'm glad to see they're going to this. I don't even want to guess how many times I've been bounced around the back of the ambulance doing CPR on somebody. And if you haven't done it, believe me, it is an experience. So I'm glad to see this is going through, and I hope it passes.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, could you, actually, I would need a motion to adopt this.
I'll make the motion to adopt it.
I'll second.
We have a motion made by Alderman Busker, seconded by Alderman Keister for the adoption of Resolution 2018-12. Madam Clerk, could you please take the roll?
McClanathan.
Aye.
Ross.
Aye.
Smith. Busker.
Aye.
Brashaw.
Aye.
Keister.
Aye.
Chesney.
Aye.
Clem.
Aye.
That resolution is adopted 8-0.
Thank you. Item number 15 is the adoption of Resolution 2018-13. Madam Clerk, would you please read this?
A resolution of the City of Freeport authorizing the city to sell surplus city real property.
Manager Crowe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We've done a screening of all of our property that we have and figured out which ones do not have easements that we have to maintain we have 2 properties. We'd like to declare them in surplus. By declaring them in surplus, then we can seek to sell the properties through 80% appraisal and then selling the properties. We appraise it and then sell it at 80% of its appraised value. And those 2 properties are 445 South Benton Avenue and 415 South Carroll. The council would still have to approve the sale of those properties. This strictly allows us to place them in surplus so that we can advertise them.
Madam Mayor?
Alderman Brashaw.
Thank you. Manager Crowe, I'm really surprised you couldn't find more than 2.
So a lot of those empty properties don't belong to us. They belong to the nonprofits, and we also wanted to make sure that we didn't sell any property that had an easement for water or sewer or stormwater on it in case we had to, you can't build on top of those properties. We don't even want to look at those. We started out with, what, 14 properties?
Correct.
Yeah, and by the time Public Works Director and the Community Development Director reviewed them, we narrowed it down to 2.
Thank you. Madam Mayor?
Alderman Brashaw.
Motion for approval?
Second. Me or Mike, whichever one you want.
Pick one.
We have a motion made by Alderman Brashaw, seconded by Alderman McClanathan for the adoption of Resolution 2018-13. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, could you please take the roll?
McClanathan.
Aye.
Ross.
Aye.
Smith.
Aye.
Busker.
Aye.
Brashaw.
Aye.
Keister.
Aye.
Chesney. Clem.
Aye.
And that resolution is adopted 8-0.
Thank you. Item number 16 is the adoption of Resolution 2018-14. Madam Clerk, could you please read this?
Resolution of the City of Freeport authorizing and approving a service agreement with Honeywell International.
Thank you. Manager Crowe.
So I know that the council, we have several council members that were interested in our Honeywell contract. So you're aware we went out to Mechanical, Lesher, and Honeywell and asked them to bid on it. We also phased out, this is for every single one of our buildings within City Hall. We removed a lot of the stuff from Old City Hall. The only things that are on Old City Hall are the fire alarms going forward. It covers all of our buildings, and it's actually less than what we're currently paying a Honeywell contract. They were the low bidder. Mechanical withdrew from the bid, and Lesher went ahead and bid it. They were, as I said, it's less than what we're paying right now, but this covers all of our buildings, covers the HVAC, heating systems, and really make sure that we're maintaining regular maintenance on these buildings.
Madam Mayor?
Alderman Brashaw.
Thank you. Manager Crowe, when I'm looking at the list of the X's, these are the actual items they'll be covering on our multiple buildings, is that correct?
That's correct.
The one marked other special provisions, multi-year pricing, is that just that there's a small amount of things that you couldn't specifically list with one building that perhaps would have pertained to one or the other?
Let me grab my contract real quick.
Page 3 of 13. On Resolution 2018-14.
All right. Let's see in my, here it is. All right. So, emergency. Give me the page again, please.
I believe it's page 3 on the page we were sent. We were sent 13 pages on this.
Okay. Or other special multi-year pricing?
Other special provisions, and yes, multi-year pricing.
Okay. So that covers basically if there's maintenance that is not, what it is that gives the, when we're talking about multi-year pricing, what they've done is because we bid this as a 3-year bid. Normally they only bid it as a 1-year bid, but to reduce it down cost, they bid a 3-year bid, and it allows them to, as we've reviewed this with Aaron, and Aaron reviewed it with Honeywell, we wanted to make sure that all of the items were found. Like it says, you see the handwritten notes. Those are Aaron's handwritten notes that if it failed originally, they'll come in and replace it for the emergency and serviceable components, but it gives the increase within, that there is an increase within the contract as we go forward.
Follow up, Mayor?
Alderman Brescia.
So in your words, you believe that there will be a savings then if it's a multi-year pricing for the 3-year term?
That's my experience.
Thank you.
Mayor?
Alderman McClenathan.
Thank you. Multi-year pricing, is that pursuant to page 8 of 11 for the exact increase?
Yes.
Thank you.
Alderman Chesney.
Thank you. Manager Crow, did you analyze the previous contract to see, the service contract, what we would have spent if we would have just paid as we would go?
Yeah, we were paying $56,000 a year, and that was to just maintain basically the old City Hall and some of the others. Not all the buildings, like the Public Works building was not included in the old contract. And I think all 3 of the fire stations were included. The fire and the police station was included, and Old City Hall was included.
Mhm.
New City Hall was not included, and the Public Works garages were not included. So,
Was there ever any discussion about just simply not doing a service contract and just paying for the?
as we go, that increases the cost exponentially, because then we get a call away cost on them, and if they have to call a second person in. Plus, this gets up to do any maintenance, and then on the contracts. Additionally, this sets up a preventive maintenance system when they come in and check the equipment, make sure that the HVACs are cleaned up and ready to go before we start the air conditioning. It does with the heating. Really, I'm trying to build a preventive maintenance program so we don't have what's occurring in Old City Hall where we didn't do preventive maintenance.
That's not true. We used to put pools on. Not me, but.
So that.
Understood. Thank you.
Yep.
Mayor.
Alderman Smith.
Honeywell is the current vendor, are they not?
They are, but
They've underbid their first year by $5,000.
That's correct. And added a building.
Do we know what the differential was between the local bidder and Honeywell?
Lesher
bid this.
Yeah, Lesher, I've got that, hold on. Lesher's contracts were bid at, first year was basically the same price that we're currently paying Honeywell, which is $55,890. Second year was $60,345, and third year was $65,365.
So a significant difference.
A significant difference.
$5,000 the first year, $7,000 the second year, and
almost $11,000.
It's $11,000 the third. Okay, thank you.
Mayor.
Alderman Keister.
Oh, thank you. Manager Crow, I've been looking through here and I haven't found what I'm looking for. What does this cover? Is this just routine maintenance, or if the thing breaks down, this cost covers repair on it, or repair if they break down is an additional fee?
It does regular maintenance and then a 24-hour, basically 24-hour service for emergency calls. So they'll come out and do the repairs, but what it doesn't cover is if they have to do parts purchased to do the repairs. It covers the parts for regular maintenance, but not for the parts if there's an emergent. But it covers them coming out and doing the service call for the emergent repair.
Okay, follow up, Mayor.
Alderman Keister.
Just so I understand this, regular maintenance is done. If they have to fix it for any reason, like a motor breaks down or something like that, that's not considered regular maintenance. We would have to pay for the parts, but the labor is free.
That's correct.
And it's a 24-hour service.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Mayor.
Alderman Keister.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion made by Alderman Keister, seconded by Alderman Busker to approve the adoption of Resolution 2018-14. Any further discussion?
Bless you.
Seeing none, Madam Clerk, could you please take the roll?
McClanathan.
Aye.
Ross.
Aye.
Smith. Busker.
Aye.
Brashaw.
Aye.
Keister.
Aye.
Chesney.
Aye.
Clem.
Aye.
Resolution is adopted 8-0.
Thank you. Item number 17 is the adoption of Resolution 2018-15. Madam Clerk, could you please read this for the record?
A resolution authorizing the acceptance of the Illinois Housing Development Authority grant under the Land Bank Capacity Program.
Director McDonald.
Thank you. In January, we submitted a grant proposal to IDA to establish a land bank under their program. We were awarded $15,500 for this purpose, and that would be for attorney's fees or any other fees associated with establishing a land bank. And the purpose of a land bank is to bank land for strategic economic development purposes. And one of the things that we're working on right now is working with the Park District to establish a park around the Boys and Girls Club. So this would be like one type of project that we could do with a land bank. There is also no match required to the $15,500.
Questions?
Mayor, motion to approve?
Second.
We have a motion made by Alderman Brashaw, seconded by Alderman Busker to approve the adoption of Resolution 2018-15. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, could you please take the roll on the passage?
McClanathan.
Aye.
Ross. Smith. Busker.
Aye.
Brashaw.
Aye.
Keister.
Aye.
Chesney.
Aye.
Clem.
Aye.
The resolution is adopted 8-0.
Thank you. Item number 18 is the purchase of extrication equipment for the fire department. Fire Chief Allen.
Thank you. We have an opportunity to purchase some slightly used equipment that was designated for some smaller communities that couldn't come up with the money to purchase this equipment. This was budgeted in last year's budget, so we do have the money sitting there. It was originally budgeted for $30,000 for a single set which has hydraulic cords, whatnot. New technology exists with these that make it more versatile, no cords. You can take them into ravines, you can take them to different places. You don't have to worry about generating units working around ethanol or any alternative fuels that could ignite if they were spilled. The one unit, so currently it's under budget by about $13,285. And the current units we have, just for your information, we have one unit we're currently operating that's over 15 years and one that's operating that's over 20 years. So we would like to get these replaced.
Mayor.
Alderman Keister.
Chief, these two Hearst tools, they are, I understand that they're electric then, or is there electric hydraulic motor on them, or how do they operate?
It's electric hydraulic.
Okay. Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion made by Alderman Keister, seconded by Alderman Ross for the approval of the purchase of the extrication equipment. Any further discussion?
Madam Mayor.
Alderman Busker.
Yeah, I'm going to support this tonight because I think I've actually had the opportunity of using tools like these, and I think it's really going to increase the safety of our firemen. They don't have to trip over hoses, which is a very real hazard when you're using that equipment. So I'm glad that this came up for as minimal cost as it is.
Mayor.
Alderman Smith.
Chief, did I understand that Chief Miller had budgeted for this last year?
Yeah, we budgeted for a single set about $30,000 at that time. And typically the generating units with the 25-foot hoses for each of the units cost about that. These are more versatile, and it's going to keep us under budget. We'll still keep one of the older units just to have it in case we need it for pushing, pulling, different things like that. But the other two units can get distributed to a couple other engines that we can use these on.
So this equipment comes in at something like $12,000 under what was budgeted.
Correct.
Thank you.
Mayor.
Alderman Keister.
One more quick question for the chief and then a quick statement. Chief, now are these just the pry tips, or are these cutting as well as pry?
Cutter spreaders, so they can
Cutter and spreader.
cut and spread. So roughly, typically on an extrication call, 75% of what we would do is spreading a door apart just to get it open, or maybe cutting the door off. The more involved extrications would get into pushing dashes, and we have equipment on the older hydraulic units to take care of that. But these make it more versatile for our people, like I said, to get down into ditches, and it actually it's less heavy work on our people to use these type of equipment.
Follow up then, Mayor.
Alderman Keister.
Just to expound on what Alderman Busker said, I too have used the older jaws with the hydraulic hoses and stuff, and where they're a wonderful tool, also with the hoses, they're a royal pain, and I'm presuming that these equipment are lighter weight than the original hydraulic jaws?
It
Are right
doesn't-
around the same?
Yeah, it's about the same. What it does is it doesn't, it gives, if you're going down into a ravine, and you'd have to take that old generator down with you, so it's about the same weight as would be a normal Jaws of Life, but you're not carrying that generator around with it.
Okay, and the versatility of that, and the fact that you're not using the hoses, and the fact that it's pretty much self-contained, and the quickness in putting them in to operation is nothing but going to help improve faster extrication and life saving. So I am in 100% support of it.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, could you please take the roll on the approval of the purchase of this equipment?
McClanathan. Ross. Smith.
Aye.
Busker.
Aye.
Brashaw.
Aye.
Keister.
Aye.
Chesney.
Aye.
Clem.
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
Thank you. On to department heads. Finance.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have nothing for tonight.
Any questions for finance? Community development.
Thank you. We've been doing the groundwork to get iWorks deployed for code enforcement, so I'd just like to remind council and the public that we'll be doing a campaign 2 weeks? April 2nd is the deployment date, so you'll actually be able to download an app on your phone, and if you see trash or another issue, you could let the community development department know right away, and we can react to it.
And the next phase will be the public works for potholes, water mains, sewer issues.
Madam Mayor?
Alderman Brashaw.
Thank you. Director McDonald, are you ready for your whole system to blow up with all the complaints as they come in?
Bring it on.
Sorry, I don't mean to laugh about it. It's not a laughing matter, but I just know people will take advantage of it.
What I really like about it is it's a real-time system, so when the guys are out and about, in the neighborhoods, if they get a notification, they might already be there. It might save some time, but I know in terms of reporting, it'll save a lot of time.
I agree.
Thank you. Public Works.
Yes, Madam Mayor. iWorks actually already reached out to me, and we had our training today on work management system. And we're beginning to look at the different work order templates as well as the community outreach application. But I think if I remember right, I think me and Tom are having a phone conversation again on Thursday afternoon to go over the work management there as well.
Any questions for Public Works? Fire.
Thank you, Mayor. Nothing tonight.
Questions for Fire? Police.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a few things. Everybody at home, just remember it's snowy out again. It's amazing how fast sometimes we forget how to drive on the snow and ice, particularly since we've been dealing with some water here recently. So I just want to take this time to publicly thank Alderman Ross for your response to this last flood that was incredible, but to Lowell, who really got all the department heads on board. Communication was incredible. I don't want to say it, but this next one's going to even be better response. And I don't want to say that, but it was incredible. The fire department had the rescues. It was amazing. And then, of course, we were the bad guys. We wrote 11 to 12 citations for driving around the barricades. So I know that caused some heartburn within the community, but it's road close. So it's, anyway, I just wanted to recognize those people. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for police? And so now we have water and sewer.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. With the flooding events of last weekend and that, we had we did not have to go and bypass to the river, which is different than what took place during the July event. So that was good. The plant was able to be maintained to a point to where things were fine. The water plant really had maybe just a little water creeping on up, but that was no big deal. I appreciate my staff that had probably 5 or 6 main breaks in the last week and a half, in addition to all the other work and inspecting the sanitary and the storm sewers to, assist our residents in their time of challenges.
Thank you. Any questions for water and sewer? IT? Nothing? Okay, then I think we're going to move on to city manager report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A couple of things here. I want to thank FACC, Salvation Army, and the Church Cooperative for all the work that they're doing, pumping out the basements out there. We're hoping to have it done. The pumping out, the weather may have put a damper on that, but we were shooting to meet. I met with them on Friday to be done by Wednesday afternoon, and then have NICA come in and do the inspection for the water heaters and the furnaces in the spaces. We do have a meeting set up. We're working to set up, DNR has asked to hold a meeting with us on flood mitigation. 200-year floods within a year is making them antsy. So they've wants to come talk to us about what their goals are in flood mitigation. One of the things the flood has put back, we're a little bit behind on Peck Path. We've held the town hall, but we're going to be doing the surveys, hopefully doing them this week, so we can get ready to do the purchase of the properties that we need out there. Just one last thing, 2 things is Be the Change fundraiser at Wagner House for the cleanup. Be the Change cleanup is Saturday night, and Saturday morning is Friends of the Peck fundraiser at Applebee's.
Okay, thank you. And just echoing what Chief and Manager Crowe said about all the thanks for the flooding things, and thank you, Art. I know that many have noticed all that you are doing, and we really appreciate that. And also, if anyone hasn't known, last week, Collaborate Freeport and All in Freeport won 2 really wonderful awards at the Illinois Governor's Conference on Tourism. They won Best Marketing Initiative, and they also won Best Website. So just wanted to say thank you to all those that are involved with that, as well as the business owners, the residents, and the visitors alike who have helped to drive the All-In Freeport story and to make that recognition possible. So thank you for those. So let's see, I believe we start with Alderman McClanathan.
No further updates tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Ross.
Oh, yeah, I got something to say. Yeah. No, no, I'm going to say, yeah, this week has been a quite eventful week. Yes, we did have the flood, and what I will have to say, it went smooth. I didn't make everybody happy, but I made some happy. Manager Crowe, I mean, everything just went went smooth. I even had to get out and work. We had a lady over on Hancock Street. We called her. She didn't want to leave out that house, but when I called Chief Barklow, he came over with 2 of his lieutenants. We went right down in the Hummer. She wouldn't leave. The next day, 2 days later, I lost contact with her over the phone, and so I got a hold of Chief Miller. Chief Miller says, well, I got 2 guys standing here right now.
Chief Allen.
Oh, excuse me. Chief Allen.
He's still new.
Yeah. We got a hold of Chief Allen, and he sent 2 of his guys down. We went down, and we got her out of the house. And she was more than grateful of getting out of that house because she'd had no more worries. But like I say, though, this time it went very smooth because there was a plan in place, and that's what it's all about. Having a plan in place and everybody work together as a team. So I just want to say thank you guys, everybody that was involved, and like I said, though, hopefully don't be another one, but we got a lot of practice in. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Smith.
Nothing, Your Honor.
Thank you, Alderman Busker.
Nothing this evening.
Alderman Brashaw?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to say about the flooding too, that a lot of people don't realize how many people were displaced and homeless. And I'm a person that people call for housing needs only because the chamber lists me as towards the top for the landlords, because it's not like I have a lot of properties, but I know all the landlords and I know who to refer people to and who will help someone and who discriminates against pets and who doesn't. And you have this little file bank up here. So I do want to thank the Chamber of Commerce for referrals to housing agents, all the churches that were involved with vouchers and monies available and emergency housing, Salvation Army. They did a lot of referrals and did appliances and did cleanup kits. They did meals. Just endless amounts of work. Red Cross had housed people at Highland Community College. They had cots set up in several families who I worked my tail feathers off to try to find housing for as well. And also FACC, who had extra beds set up and took in a bunch of people. And it's surprising how a community can come together, not once, but twice within a year. I mean, it's been less than a year since the last flood, and pulled together and try to help all these people. And I felt some days like I didn't get anything else done. All I did was talk on the phone. But it did help a lot of people, and I appreciate all the organizations and you also, Alderman Ross, for putting people into the right avenues and helping pull people together as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Keister.
Thank you, Mayor. Just real quickly, some of you know I have been working on getting my pilot's license over the past 6-8 months. And I hit a big milestone a while ago, or a few weeks ago. I got to solo for the first time, fly by myself. They're taking the training wheels off the plane now, which also put me in a unique position because that happened before the flood. And instead, during that period of time, instead of going up with the instructor, I was able to go up solo and be able to get, shall we say, a different perspective on the flooding area and see it from the air. And believe me, you don't really have a good perspective of how much area was underwater until you get up above there and look down and see how much it was. And I believe it was Monday or Tuesday I was up, and you could actually watch the water flowing away from the east side and going back to the river. So that was kind of an interesting thing. But other than that, Mayor, that's all I have.
Alderman Chesney.
Nothing tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Clem.
I'd just like to give kudos also to Alderman Ross, who was involved all the time in this, day and night, and all of us on the council receive messages daily, twice daily, 3 times daily.
20 or 30 times daily?
Yeah.
Sometimes.
On what was going on, which we had never had before, and that's greatly appreciated. Also, just want to take a second, we didn't get a chance to announce it before, but we had Boy Scout Troop number 7 from First Lutheran Church here tonight visiting us to watch how a city hall meeting works. They just celebrated their 75th anniversary at First Lutheran. So kudos to them and thank them for coming.
Thank you. Alderman Ross.
Excuse me. I forgot to mention one thing. Cal Wascon from the Salvation Army called me today, and he's looking for volunteers for this Saturday morning, 8:30, to hand out food baskets to the people that's been involved in the flood. If you have a truck, he would like that. What he would do, he's going to, they have 150 food boxes in which they want to give out. And they're going to give each person that has a truck, you go 2 by 2, they would give you 25 boxes to go ahead and hand out, and then we go from there. So he would like to know if any of the aldermen would like to sign up, not putting you on the spot right now, but really, he would like to know if you be willing to help out and then and go from there. If the person's not home, we just leave a door hanger and go from there. But he called me and I told him I would announce it and see, go from there. Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 23 is public comment. Seeing none. Madam Clerk, item number 24 is executive session. Could you please read this for the record?
Pursuant to 5 ILCS 120/2C21, discussions of minutes lawfully closed under this act, whether for purposes of approval by the body of the minutes or semi-annual review of the minutes as mandated by Section 2.06. Action will follow executive session.
Thank you. Is there such a motion?
So move.
Second.
We have a motion made by Alderman Keister, seconded by Alderman Busker to enter into executive session. Madam Clerk, could you please take the roll?
McClanathan. Ross.
Aye.
Smith. Busker. Brashaw.
Aye.
Keister.
Aye.
Chesney. And Clem.
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.